Everyone always wants to know, how big is the crowd? Usually there are bragging rights and political agendas associated with those figures. CNN's Kathleen Koch is on the Mall this afternoon keeping tabs on the activities. Kathleen, don't worry, we're not going to ask you for a precise head count, but just tell us an estimate of what the turnout looks like right now.
Well, Renee, I'll have our camera swoop up and it will show you we have a slight problem right now, and that's that many of the demonstrators have left about 45 minutes ago. They started heading up to Capitol Hill for a march, so our numbers have dropped off dramatically, but the estimate is that it was roughly about 200,000. Now that, according to the organizers, of course, have a stake in this. It was clearly not as large as other protests I have covered, for instance, the Promise Keepers back in 1997, or the Million Man March. Now that was back in 1995, and it was at that event that they claimed to have a turnout, or excuse me, the Park Police estimated the turnout at that event at about 400,000. However, those who organized that event, Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam, said, no, we have some 870,000 people here. They even had at least one expert who backed them up on that, and so there was a great deal of controversy, even lawsuits threatened, and finally the Congress just said simply, no more counting by the U.S. Park Police. Now, when you look back through history, we have had numerous very, very large marches and events here in Washington. The largest that was ever counted was back in 1965, and that was for the inaugural of President Lyndon B. Johnson. That's when they say some 1.2 million people turned out. Now, the second largest was said to be back in 1976, celebrating the nation's bicentennial here on the 4th of July, when they said about 1 million people turned out. And of course, Renee, you know, why does everyone care about how many people are here? Because in this city, numbers count. Numbers put people in office. Numbers win votes on Capitol Hill. And so competing groups, especially on very polarizing issues like the abortion issue, they point to the turnout at their dueling rallies, at their dueling marches every year, as proof that their cause has won favor over their opponent. So very important issue for a lot of people. Renee.
Exactly, Kathleen. Talks about the strength or weakness of a particular cause on a given day. Thank you very much for that report, and we hope you stay warm today. Well, here to fill us in on how those experts do indeed make those crowd estimates is Dr. Farouk El-Baz of Boston University's Center for Remote Sensing. Dr. El-Baz, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
So how do most people estimate these crowd sizes, and does it matter who's doing the counting?
The most estimates are really done by looking at the crowds, either from the ground or from a building or from a helicopter, and guesstimate. So all of these are not real counts, and they are not even estimates. They are guesstimates, because no one can really look at a crowd and figure a possible number.
Kathleen did mention the Million Man March, and I know that you got involved with that one in 1997. Tell us what happened there. The National Park Service came up with a final estimate of about 400,000 people. You came in, you looked at some photographs, and you came in with your final estimate of about twice that, 837,000. What happened? Why such a big gap there? What does that mean?
The National Park Service did the count by flying over the crowds, and not necessarily straight over. They flew away from the crowd, and because they were afraid that if something happened to the aircraft and it drops, it will kill people. So they don't really fly over the crowd to get a good view, but they fly on the side away from the crowd, at least 1 block away from the crowd. And they estimate the number basically from the number of buses that come into town, the number of cars that are parked near the area, and the number of tickets for the the mass transit. So all of these are guesstimates. There is not a real way of making certain that the number that's given is exactly representative. So what we did was to take photographs taken by the National Park Service helicopters and then process them with computers in the way that we process other satellite images, in a way that I had actually designed to count the number of sand dunes in a desert by placing a grid on a unit area and counting the number of sand dunes. And we did that with people, so we counted how many people per square meter in all of the different areas and came up with this number. So the National Park Service came up with 400,000, and our number was more than twice as much.
So I'm wondering, let me interrupt because we only have about a minute left here, but I know that because of the controversy involving that big gap there between the Park Service numbers and what the organizers of the Million Man March said, the Park Service is out of the business now of guesstimating crowds. What kind of technology would be needed to get more accurate figures on these kinds of events?
The reason the National Park Service got out of it was actually because they asked me to write them to tell them what should they do to get a real number. And we told them that they need to have a fixed-wing aircraft to fly directly over the crowds with a window to put a camera and take photographs. And the images can be transmitted digitally and fast to computers where analysts can actually do this automatically and very accurately. But there is a dollar sign assigned to that. And so the National Park Service took this proposal or the white paper that we made and took it to Congress to say, either you can give us this money to do it the way the experts know how to do it, or we should get out of the business of counting people. And Congress said, no, you should get out of the business.
Okay, so now we're going to rely on just the event organizers to give us these kind of numbers. So I guess we'll keep talking about estimates and accuracy or inaccuracy as long as these events still keep going on. Dr. Farouk El-Baz, Boston University Center for Remote Sensing, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.